What is going on, everybody? Welcome into the Football Diary, telling the stories of today and yesterday in the NFL. And it is a weekday, so we're talking about current NFL and what we wanted to look at. We like betting on the NFL season. We like betting on individual games, and we wanted to look at kind of the best over/under bets that you can make in the NFL this upcoming season. Now, there are a lot of bets that we do like. However, one just stood head and shoulders above the rest. Like, you should absolutely 100% be making this bet, max units, everything like that. And Matt, do you want to tell everybody what that is? Because it's ridiculous that it's so low.
Yeah, so the bet that we both think that you guys should definitely make would be the Steelers to win over 8.5 games. Now, for some reason, when you bring up the Pittsburgh Steelers right now, everyone is like disgusted and thinks they're going to be really bad and want to point to, the Browns and the Ravens are in that division, really good division. They lost Bud Dupree. But let's look back. If we go back like halfway through the year last year, they were at those 8.5 wins. They were 9 games in the year. They were at nine wins. So this is a team that is consistently in the playoffs. And basically what you're betting is the Steelers are going to be over 500. I'm pretty shocked that that's the bet when you start looking at who they were able to retain. Who is the one big loss they had, McConnell? It's Bud Dupree, right? Like, that's the guy that stands out.
That's the only guy that they lost that's going to be major. I mean, they lost technically David DeCastro. They lost Alejandro Villanueva. Not major pieces. Bud Dupree's the only guy that's a major piece that they lost. And they're getting back, I think, a more important piece in Devin Bush. I think, Matt, do you want to talk about that? Devin Bush's impact, because it is so overlooked.
Well, we were talking about it before we got on, and basically Devin Bush is one of those guys that he's one of the linebackers, like the Fred Warners, the Eric Kendricks, where he might not be that like tier, that elite of a linebacker, but his responsibilities are through the roof. He's a very fast player, and you look at this defensive line that plays in front of them. They want the guys like Cam Hayward, TJ Watt. They want those guys going after the quarterback. So he's asked to do so much in terms of sideline to sideline. And when he went down, I remember me and you were like, oh, this is going to be really tough for the Steelers to overcome this. And then Bud Dupree went down, and then their defense kind of fell apart. And they also had major offensive issues. And that's kind of where the Steelers fell apart last year, is when they lost Devin Bush. So there is also the case of, like, is he going to be the same guy? I'm expecting that he will be. Like, a lot of knee injuries nowadays, like, especially football players, come back from them pretty much at full strength, if not full strength, like 85-90% of who they were. So I'm expecting Devin Bush to be back. I'm expecting him to be similar to the player he was last year and years prior. Him coming back is going to be huge. And yes, they lost Bud Dupree. They signed Melvin Ingram. Like, it's going to be all right. I'm not super concerned. I think the biggest area, like at least on the defensive side, I'm not concerned about the defense. I think the defense will be pretty good. Is it going to be the number one defense in the NFL? Maybe not, but I would be surprised if it's not a top 5 defense, and maybe they give up a lot of yards or something, but they're going to be one of the top sack defenses in the league. They're going to have a ton of picks. We know their secondary has a couple ball hawks out there. And you have Cam Hayward, TJ Watt, Stephon Tuitt. Like, you're going to get to the quarterback. That's for sure. Melvin Ingram last year definitely had the worst year of his career. But if I trust an organization to kind of have a guy bounce back, it's probably the Steelers are going to be one of the top teams on that list, especially on the defensive side of the football. So I'm not super concerned about them defensively. Offensively, I do have a couple concerns. But before we get into that, what are your thoughts on this defense? Like, do you think they're going to be that dominant level that they were last year?
Yeah, I mean, if everybody watching this, they can obviously see the Baltimore Ravens stuff. I am a Baltimore Ravens fan, okay? I understand how good this Pittsburgh Steelers defense is going to be. I think everybody in the AFC North, all of the AFC North fans, a lot of fans that honestly just get mad at Juju for making TikToks and everything like that, they saw the Steelers kind of fall apart at the end of the year. I believe they only won one game as they finished the season after they lost their undefeated streak. They only won one more game. And everybody was like, oh, they're done. I think we all wrote off Big Ben, and we just said the Steelers are done. It's time for them to rebuild. And everybody all of a sudden went to expect that the Steelers are going to suck. But what did the Steelers do? Okay. Now I'm not talking about the defense right now. I'll get into that. What did the Steelers do? They re-signed Big Ben. They re-signed Juju. 1 year, right? That shows the commitment that they're like, one more year of trying to be that team. They couldn't get it done with the Killer Bees, but they're finally trying. Okay, this is our last attempt. That's basically what they told Juju. Hey, Juju, we're bringing back Big Ben. Let's do this thing. So then you look at the defensive side of the ball, and Matt, you brought up a lot of great players on that defensive line. To it, Cam Hayward. Obviously, they've got T.J. Watt. They have one of the most underrated players in the NFL in Alualu, one of the best defensive linemen that does not get any recognition whatsoever. Absolute beast. Okay, they have Melvin Ingram, and you brought him up, Devin Bush. His loss was the most overlooked loss, the most overlooked thing really in the NFL last season. You and I recognized it instantly. We watch a ton of football, and we pay attention to those smaller things. And a lot of people don't. They just see like, oh, the team, they keep losing because sometimes, you don't have time to watch the Steelers, whatever the reason is, nobody paid attention.
It's funny you call it like a smaller loss, because that's like a massive impact loss. Like everyone should have recognized like, oh, the Steelers are probably going to take a huge step back after Devin Bush goes down, and everyone's like, oh, look at this guy, Big Ben washed. That was like the narrative of their team.
That's all they focused on. They were like, because everybody kept saying, oh, they're playing a fraudulent schedule, which always happens whenever a team is undefeated. Every single time. The 49ers were 8-0. Fraudulent schedule. The New England Patriots were 8-0. Fraudulent schedule. The Pittsburgh Steelers were 11-0. Oh, they didn't play anybody. That's what they always say. Every team. Every single team. It's always just, oh, they just couldn't play anybody. Okay, the Steelers then lost. Maybe I would say he's the second most important player on their defense behind TJ Watt. You could maybe argue that Minkah Fitzpatrick is a little bit higher, but what he's asked to do, Matt, you talked about it, sideline to sideline, he is the guy that is able to stop pretty much any player, unless you have a guy like a Lamar Jackson speed type player that can get outside in front of him. That defense is so hard to get through. That front seven is so good with him right there. And when he was lost, we looked at it and we're like, ooh, you can't replace that. Because remember when they lost Ryan Shazier? It took a while for them to replace it until they got Devin Bush. The defense really dropped off until they got Devin Bush. They just didn't seem like the same defense. I think this defense could absolutely be the same level that they were last year. They could definitely lead the league in sacks once again. And if you're the defense that leads the league in sacks and you have a playmaker like Minkah Fitzpatrick in the secondary, you will easily be a top 5 defense in the NFL, probably a top 3, could very well be the number 1 defense. And then you look at the offense, and I think one of the biggest storylines, Big Ben, can't throw the ball deep. You look at what he does. What is he doing? 3-step drop, quick slant. He's getting the ball out in like 2.5 seconds every single play. Why was that? They had the worst running back core you could maybe possibly imagine. These guys are running out there with Benny Snell and James Conner. Who was the other running back that they had, Matt?
Anthony McFarland. Not a quality trio whatsoever.
This is a terrible running back core. Look at when the Steelers have had success. Le'Veon Bell, Rashad Mendenhall. Even James Conner, his first season was decent. They had D'Angelo Williams, and they were able to utilize him in different ways. But, James Conner was, I believe, coming off of injury. And, he was off and on throughout the entire season. He wasn't even 100%. I think he's kind of a below average running back. But last year, he was significantly worse than what he normally is because he was so sporadic in being able to play. And you look at that and you say, why isn't Big Ben running the football? They can't run the football. It could not happen. Those running backs are not running backs that you could say they help the offense. If you have a great offensive line and you put Benny Snell back there and you have a great run scheme, maybe you've got, a Kyle Shanahan or a Sean McVay, maybe they could be a decent guy. Like they could put up a good season. Steelers don't have an amazing run blocking offensive line. They don't have, Mike Tomlin isn't a guy that's like, oh my goodness, he's going to design the greatest offensive scheme of all time. No disrespect to Mike Tomlin. He's a great head coach, but they don't have a run game. So Big Ben had to throw those quick slants. So what did they do? Najee Harris. That is a guy where if he has a poor running, if he has a poor offensive line, he can still make plays. He's not going to be a guy that, oh, he got good blocks. Oh, he took the wrong hole and he got 2 yards. And it's like, oh, Najee Harris hits the hole, hurdled the middle linebacker, trucked the safety, and scored a 75-yard touchdown. Like, that's the type of player Najee is. He's an absolute monster. And then you also got, those great wide receivers that they have in Pittsburgh. I know how much people hate on them because they make TikTok dances. That does not take away from the fact that they're good wide receivers, okay? Just because they're corny off the field doesn't mean they're absolute monsters on the field.
Also,
Matt, what do you think?
One other thing. Everyone, for some reason, has just decided that Juju's soft because he makes TikToks. Juju is – I think Juju is the most physical receiver in the whole NFL. He is like, maybe you could talk about Julio Jones and like DK Metcalf and those guys.
Maybe Mike Evans could be thrown.
Oh, Mike Evans. Yeah. Okay, Mike probably second to Mike Evans.
Yeah,
and that's not to say like those other guys aren't physical. Juju is a run blocking just menace. He takes guys' heads off across the middle, and like yes, he's got popped a couple times, but every receiver gets popped. Like I don't know. I just like Juju's game is built around like getting deeper contested catches and like slants that he's taken to the crib. And he's stiff arming a safety. Like that's his game. His game is built on physicality. It was like that at USC, always been like that. So yeah, you might make some corny TikToks, but when he's on the field, he's gonna thump. That's for sure. Yeah. And then you brought up the other receivers. Chase Claypool, fantastic rookie year. Deontay Johnson had a little bit of an issue with the drops, but I mean, he might be like the most talented guy after the catch there. Really, really good at that. You brought it up. They couldn't run the ball last year, and of course, a lot of that should be attributed to the offensive line. But like you said, that's the running back room isn't helping that. A run game is a cohesive unit. And if you are struggling in the offensive line and you're like, we don't have the capital to really to fix this issue, like it's still going to be an issue going into next year. The best way to do that is to draft Najee Harris, because Big Ben will be able to sit back. Big Ben will be able to utilize play action a lot more. They were not able to do that. If you guys go back like to the beginning of the Bill Walsh era, he created the West Coast offense because the Cincinnati Bengals could not run the football. Basically, the Steelers' offense last year was what that Bengals offense was in like, I want to say it was like the 70s. I could be a little bit off on the time, but he did it because they couldn't run the football. The Steelers they could not run the football last year. And so what did they have to do? All right, we got to get the ball out less than 3 seconds every single time within 5 yards. All right, Deontay, just go and score some points. That's basically what their offense was in the second half. That is not sustainable. That's not going to work. This year, their offense will not look like that. Now, is it going to be perfect in the run game? No, of course not. Are you going to see Najee get popped in the backfield because, the guard or one of the tackles that allows the defensive end to scream off the edge? Of course. But occasionally, we're going to see Najee Harris go, all right, I'm going to throw this guy in the dirt, and then I'm going to take this ball, like you said, 75 yards, hurdle the middle linebacker, truck the safety. Like, he does that. He's one of the very, very, very few players that the sport has ever seen that is a downhill runner, but yet at the same time is able to utilize his horizontal movement to gain yards and get upfield. Like, he does both. He's a great pass cut. He is a complete running back. Yep. It's also a huge guy that you're not going to take down. So if he's healthy on that offense, it's going to be a really physical offense. Yes, there's definitely question marks among the offensive line, but that is the best way to kind of like cover that up. Like, it's the best way to do it in my opinion. So I was really happy that Najee went there. Also taking him number 1 overall in fantasy. Without a question, that's the guy this year. Like, that's the rookie player this year.
Dynasty fantasy.
Fantasy. But that's where I wanted him to go. I always thought it made the most sense. And even like, that was one of like, how many mock drafts you see in the NFL? One of the few guys where it was like, yeah, this makes a lot of sense if Najee goes to the Steelers, and then he went to the Steelers. Like, it made too much sense in my mind for them to pass up on him. I applaud them for going after that. And of course, you're going to see some people freak out, never take a running back in the first round. I would argue it's a lot worse to pay a running back than it is to take a running back in the first round. You see a lot of hits on these early guys taken, and he's taken late 20s. He might be a top 10 talent in the draft. He might be a top 5 talent in the draft. So yeah, I love the pick. I think it's going to make them look so much better. Does Big Ben have some issues? Yeah, he's not the best quarterback anymore. Is their offensive line? Yeah, it's not that good. but they have elite skill position guys. And those guys are going to help a lot. And I think we're going to see, and the thing is, even if we brought up the defense, even if the offense is average or above average, the team will be really good because their defense is going to generate a lot of turnovers, generate a lot of sacks. It's going to be really tough for opposing offenses. And if they can control the clock better, that lets that defense, that allows that defense to be so much more than it was, especially in the second half of last year's season. So I think the Steelers, and yes, also they're in a tough division.
I want to add into that. So I think everybody looks at the division. They look at the AFC North, and you look at the Baltimore Ravens. Obviously, Ravens stuff, Ravens fan. You look at the Cleveland Browns, and you say, oh, it's going to be really tough to beat them. Look at what the Browns did to them in the playoffs. Yeah. You can look at that. They were down 28-0. Steelers almost came back and beat the Browns in that game. The Steelers destroyed the Browns early in the season. I believe they beat the Browns later in the season. I believe they went 2-0 in the regular season against the Browns. They might have lost the second game, but I believe they went undefeated. Big Ben has never lost to Lamar Jackson. He's never lost. The Steelers swept the Ravens last year. The Steelers play very well against those teams. This is not a division like any other in the NFL. It is the most physical division, okay? Now they have their linebacker that can slow down Lamar Jackson, slow down Nick Chubb on the outside, slow down Kareem Hunt on the outside. And then you add in Najee Harris, who's going to allow Big Ben to set up the play action because the Ravens, they've got Marcus Peters, likes to bite. You've got, Denzel Ward. You've got all these guys that now you can make it a little bit tougher because the safeties can't play over top, right? Because you got to cover Najee. That's going to allow them to win more games. And that's what's making them so slept on, is because everybody thinks, oh, their division is so hard. Steelers play their division very well. They play the Ravens.
Play the Bengals.
They are the only team that I am afraid of when the Ravens go in there, because I am like, how are the Ravens going to score? They shut down Lamar Jackson. They're the only team to do it. Like Lamar Jackson, I go in there and I'm like, he's going to throw 2 picks against the Steelers, maybe 3. Because they just have a game plan, because they're so good and so well coached that this is a team that you don't want to play if you're in the AFC North. And I think people just completely overlook that, and they're like, oh, but the Browns roster and the Ravens roster doesn't matter in the AFC North. The Bengals can beat any team in the AFC North because that's how hard they play against each other. It's different than any other division. It's so physical. It's so tightly fought. And that's why the Steelers can absolutely, I wouldn't be surprised. I don't think it's going to happen, but I wouldn't be surprised if the Steelers swept the division. It could happen. That's how tough it is.
Well, you're bringing up this, and also say they go 2-4 against the division. We're only banking them to win 9 games. That's not even that crazy.
That's true.
It's not like we're like, oh, the Steelers are going to go out here, they're going to win 15 games. They're going to go 15-2. No. We're saying they're going to go 9-8. That's all you need. That's why it's such a great bet.
And it's also people forget when they're making these bets. It's a 17-game season. You have an extra, previously I would still think that they're a 9-win team last year in a 16-game season. But 17 games, you add an extra game. No longer is it going, 9-7. It's going 9-8. That's very, very likely. I would almost say, barring any sort of injury, it's guaranteed that they do it. It's absolutely ridiculous that it slept on that much. Do you have anything else to add, Matt, or do you think that's a good place to wrap it up?
That's pretty much all I got. I am surprised that it's that low. We're looking at some of these, and there's also ones that catch my eye of this team's not going to win that many games, or this team only 10 wins, or like the Chiefs is 12.5. It's oh yeah, the Chiefs will probably win 14 games. But this one is there's a good chance that the Steelers win 11 or 12 games. And
it's not a 8.5 minus 145. For me, it's plus 100 for them to win 8.5. That means they're leaning more on the side of it should be 8, which is even more ridiculous. Pittsburgh Steelers, absolutely the go-to bet. Max units on the over right there. Comment down below your thoughts and opinions on different over-under bets that you really like. Comment your thoughts and opinions on the Steelers. We got plenty of videos. I think we're going to be talking about some fun stuff, throughout this week. We got a lot of videos planned out. Should be a lot of fun. Comment any ideas that you have you want us to talk about. We want to talk about what you want to listen to. So let us know in the comment section down below. Thank you, everybody, for watching. Subscribe for daily content. I almost said daily Ravens content, like my Ravens YouTube channel. Subscribe for daily football content. current content weekdays, historic content on the weekends. We will see all of you again tomorrow.